Hi, Azortharion here. They just killed BM. Alright, so what happened here? So there were some changes made to the PTR, I've talked about in other videos. And in those changes, they made some nerfs to the Basilisk Color talent, which is what's driving a lot of single target BM power right now. And they buffed sort of BM's base kit to compensate mostly kill command and pet damage. And you think, well, this is going to sort of cancel out and it's going to shift more power out of Basilisk Color and into the general kit. And the sort of hope was that it would come out roughly equal and it would be easier to tune on AoE and so on. It's not exactly what happened. So what they announced today is that they are sort of bringing these changes forward to live servers hitting next week, which is going to be October 9th, as I've written here. This is a write-up that I made, by the way, and I'm using this neat website to show it. So let me know what you think of this. And if it's clear enough, I'll zoom in so that it's real big text for you mobile users in my comments. All right. So the actual changes that are landing are Basilisk Color damage bonus per damage over time effect reduced to 2/4%. So I got some, didn't put them in this thing here, but I did have some sims here on my second screen that I could just quickly reference. Yeah, okay. So this nerf is roughly, for single target, 17%. Okay. Kill command damage increased by 18%. So this is one of our main things. This is worth roughly 4% DPS. Pet damage increased by 4%. So for our main build, that's around just under 3%. So you can sort of do the math yourself. We got nerfed 17%, and then we got buffed by roughly 4%, and then 3%. What is the end result of that? Well, it's around a 10% single target nerf. 10% is a lot. It is, in fact, so much that... should have opened this previously maybe, but if you check this chart here, not that this chart is really the end-all be-all, but it is sort of a chart that shows raw single target performance, at least in Sims, for all the specs in WoW. And there are a few things it doesn't take into account, and we'll get into the details. But essentially, once this website decides that it wants to load, and I'm just kind of, there we go. All right, if we shave 10%, 9%, 10%, so like in the 9 to 10%, if we shave 10% off this, then BM goes down to roughly here. And then, of course, Pack Leader also got nerfed, and it's going to be right around here, basically. So BM is now the worst single target spec in the game. You're probably thinking now, or you might be thinking, what about PI? Well, PI value is still pretty high for BM. In terms of outright DPS gain, like a Biscuit BM Hunter will probably gain more from PI than almost any other spec, except for maybe Unholy DK, which you don't tend to see that much. I mean, it kind of depends on the fight, I suppose. But yeah. So, and even if you do give BM PI and you add 6% to it, well, it's only going to end up, let me just grab my calculator here. It's only going to end up roughly here, which is below Dark Ranger without PI. So with that in mind, BM single target at least is kind of dead. But they buffed AoE, right? That was the whole point of all this thing. Well, there's also a survival change, by the way. Survival change, I imagine 1% of audience cares, but this is a good change, and it's probably worth 2 to 3%. I haven't simmed this kind of napkin math. 2 to 3% single target, which is good. It's not game breaking, but survival wasn't super represented. A buff is good. Let's move on to the stuff you actually clicked this video for, though. Are the BM changes a buff or a nerf on single target AoE? We've just talked about single target. It's around a 9% single target nerf. For AoE, it's around a 7 to 9% AoE buff, depending on hero talent. So it's a bigger buff for Pack Leader than it is for Dark Ranger. Okay. Are there any talent changes for BM? So for single target, we're probably just going to move 1 point of Basilisk Color into Wild Instincts, like a 1 point talent swap, no impact on your playstyle, anything like that. It's just kind of a numbers thing behind the scenes. Nothing really of note there. I might be wrong about this. This is what my early sims are telling me, and of course, algorithm, you got to get out with these videos early, and everyone wants to know right now. In the coming days, some of this stuff may change, but I'm 90% confident in my conclusions. For Mythic Plus talent changes, this is much more difficult to work out, and I just cannot work this out in sort of a very short time. I'll need a day or so. Probably over the weekend. After the weekend, I'll probably, like, certainly before the new patch, or so the changes land, the next weekly reset, you will know what the best M+ changes are. But it's probably just moving some Basilisk Collar talents into some other things like Killer Cobra, Piercing Fangs, which we don't also always run at the moment, and so on. But yeah, count on Icy Veins to be updated real soon. What about hero talents? Well, everything that buffs BM sort of base kit is a buff to Pack Leader, because sort of Pack Leader buffs what you're already doing, whereas Dark Ranger sort of adds stuff on top of what you're already doing, right? But even with that in mind, so BM kind of got nerfed as a whole, except for AoE, but sort of if we look at sort of holistically, Pack Leader got nerfed less for this reason, right? So Pack Leader is still around 6% behind pure single target, while only being around 3% ahead on AoE. And on priority targets, like in Mythic Plus, when you have like a big, think Necrotic Wake Gatekeepers, those sort of mobs, those things that really matter, and not just for speed, but also safety of the key, right? They're a priority target for a reason. Dark Ranger's around 4% ahead on those. So with that in mind, like especially given Dark Ranger's single target benefit, while Pack Leader is probably competitive for overall DPS, for like serious keys where you're not just thinking about overall, but you're thinking about where is that damage going, Dark Ranger is still the play here. So no hero talent tree changes expected for like competitive play. But I think those who really dislike the Dark Ranger for whatever reason and like to play Pack Leader, they're a little bit closer to viable in Mythic Plus. On single target, it's still the worst spec in the entire game. All right. What about the overall spec balance? So a lot of people will be wondering about this. So if I just said BM is kind of dead and it's in the title, and sincerely, guys, like it's kind of a clickbait sounding title, right? But I don't think it's clickbait. Like I kind of mean it when I write that. So BM is now 10 to 15% behind the other specs for pure single target, depending on nuances such as whether marksmanship runs Sentinel or Dark Ranger. So what do I mean by this? Sentinel is the highest simming hero talent tree. But in practice, Dark Ranger will often outperform it on bosses that move and general movement and so on. So it kind of depends on where you draw the line, right? But 10 to 15%, no matter how you slice it, it's a huge gap, as I write here. So what about AoE? Well, instead of being 45, 50% behind on AoE compared to like BM is only 35 to 40% behind on pure single 6 target AoE. So in terms of like overall viability and sort of meta-ness, if you can call it that, this basically did nothing to change BM's like standing in Mythic Plus. Like it's going to be a little bit less terrible, but really only a little bit, because the single target nerf is quite significant as well. It's still very far behind MM's AoE, and now it's single target in Mythic Plus builds and Mythic Plus scenarios, which used to be kind of a strength, especially relative to Like if you've played in Mythic Plus, the single target is not the hottest thing, right? You're sort of there for the AoE. Well, now BM doesn't even have that strength anymore. And as I write here, overall, it is hard not to conclude that Beast Mastery is somewhat dead. Because why is that? The primary strength it had, which was like single target, reliable, strong single target, like if you saw Raise the World first, it topped boss damage on the last boss. That strength it had of like reliable single target, that has basically been evaporated. And then they buffed its worst weakness, but they didn't buff the weakness enough so that it's actually good at what it used to be bad at. So now instead of being really good single target and really bad AoE, it's really bad single target and still really bad AoE, but not quite as bad as before. And yeah, that's sort of where we are. This is based on numbers and sim overrides that were quickly cooked by Talo from the Hunter Discord and myself. I write here errors may occur, but with that said, I don't think we completely screwed this up. If errors occur, it's like a few % here and there, but the conclusion we're both pretty confident in, I would say. What happens now? I think what happens now is that you let Blizzard, well, first of all, you gotta let me know what you think of all this in the comments below, and to drive a bunch of comment engagement, and maybe like, subscribe on the video. I would appreciate that. But perhaps more importantly, in the grand scheme, is that you hit up Blizzard and you tell them what you think about this. BM is one of the most popular specs in the game, when I last checked at least, and I can't imagine that a lot of people are going to be happy about this. It's like, I've been around for a very long time. I know I'm kind of baby-faced, but I've been around for a long time, and I don't think I've seen something quite as insane as this when it comes to tuning-wise. But maybe my memory is short. And of course, if you think my memory is short, then you'll remind me of what I forgot about in the comments below. Bit of a somber video, I guess. I'll be changing my gear over to MM because, we are Nexus Princess Proc in my guild. I suspect I'll just be playing MM on that, at least starting next reset. Maybe we'll kill it on Monday before they destroy BM. And for the next 2 bosses on Mythic, Silken Court, hard to say. Ensuric, probably MM. Survival also got a little bit of a buff, but I still think, practically speaking, Survival is going to be behind MM in many cases. Yeah, I guess, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace.